My name is Charlotte and I work for and run KIP Education. And yeah, I'm going to be talking today about harm reduction in youth work and drugs. Previous to my role in KIP Education, I was a drug worker for about 12 years, or just under 12 years. So my knowledge around drugs is quite vast. I still work with young people. I'm not one of those trainers that doesn't work with young people, you know, worked with young people 10 years ago. I still actually do work with young people. Even now in this very weird pandemic time, I'm still working with young people, which is really nice. And really nice for me as well, because I get to go off and do stuff like this and not homeschool, which is really nice, if I'm honest. For any of you who are doing homeschool, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. This actually feels like I'm in a spa. This is the equivalent of going to a spa, being with you guys. So I'm going to be covering tons of stuff today around youth work and substance misuse. I'm also really happy because it's not a particularly massive group. Like if you want to put in the chat, like where you're from, but like also what you're sort of hoping to get from this session. Like maybe there's a specific drug that you're particularly worried about and you want to know about, and then I can just put a bit more stuff around that. But yeah, I'm just going to do my thing and hope that you guys will interrupt. I am an adult that has been diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, so I'm very happy to interrupt and you guys to interrupt, because that's what I do. Interrupting is a normal thing. For any of you who have anybody who is neurodiverse at home, you'll know that interrupting is it's just standard, just happens, you know. So we don't get stressed about interruptions. We just like a bit of interruptions, to be honest. It makes the world go by. So what I would like you to do firstly is all put your cameras on, because otherwise I feel like I'm just talking to 5 people. So unless you are like, I had someone the other week who said, hi, I'm in Chicago and it's 4:30 a.m. and I'm not putting my camera on. Okay, so if it's 4:30 a.m. in your house, you're somewhere else, don't put your camera on, I get you. But otherwise, get your camera on, because I've got to get you motivated and ready to go. I'm about to change your brain immediately, effective now, okay? So what I want you to do is stand up. I know some of you look like you're eating your breakfast, your lunch, whatever it is. You still need to stand up with your feet hip width apart, and you will know that your feet are in straight line, in line with your hips, because the outside of your feet will line up. Okay, so you want the outside of your feet to line up. Now I'm not going to stand up because I need to do the camera thing so you can see me. Amazing, George, thank you. Ellie, yes, yes, yes. Yes, Zin, it doesn't matter if your camera's not working. I know you're standing up. And what I want you to do is get your thumbs up like this. Yes. And then you're going to put them next to your ears like this. Stand up nice and straight. Now because your feet are aligned, your hips are aligned. Now when you put your elbows up, you're extra aligned. And I just want you to do this 25 times. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Try doing it 25 times. If you want to make like a warrior sound at the same time, go for it. Wah! Ooh, 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 ooh. How good is this? Ellie, it's harder than you thought, isn't it? You thought it was going to be easy. You're like, it's a bit hard. Come on. I don't know what you're on. Ellie, what are you on? Shout out your number. She doesn't know. She's given up.
I lost count.
George, what happened? Right, let's just do 7 more just to be sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Amazing. Right, sit your butts down. Now tell me you feel the same as you did before. You don't, right? You don't. That's it. I'm just putting it out there. We have just tricked our brains just like that into believing that we are pumped up and full of energy, which is an amazing thing. It's actually called the ESCO method. I can put it in the chat later on, and you will be able to use it. You can look it up. It's amazing. It's a great icebreaker, and it's just a great thing to do anyway. Yeah, someone said they feel better for moving. We all feel better for moving, but we actually, at that point, what we've just done, we've actually released endorphins and stuff into our brain. And if you are like me and you're neurodiverse and you so serotonin, sometimes we have them anyway, serotonin's a bit down, dopamine's down, and we need to have these boosters, these mood boosters, which will help lift us. About today, because it's relevant to a bit of self-care, and self-care is a great place to start when we're talking about drugs. Okay, so I'm just looking in the chat. I can see what everyone wants to know about. Oh, you're a pupil referral unit, Marnie. I used to work in one of those. That's hard work. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. I'm hoping you can all see. If you can, just put your thumbs up. I can see you. Everyone can see. Wonderful. Okay. So this is my working agreement. I have an agreement in all of my sessions, virtual or face-to-face, with adults or young people. And it is really important that we are making sure that young people know what the ground rules are. You either put them together or you have them on a board or whatever it is, you have it like this. I like to get young people involved in what the agreement looks like. It makes it easier when enforcing it, because if we've written it all together. But there are a few sort of really important parts of the working agreement, and confidentiality is one of the most important. And you need to remind young people of confidentiality every single time, because for some of you, your young people are actually going to disclose stuff to you knowing your confidentiality. So they actually do want you to take it further or support them in a different way. So by reminding young people of the confidentiality, you give that space for disclosure. And I want you to learn to love disclosures and what they mean and how they support young people. The other is listening and respecting each other and your commitment to contribute. So like I've just got you to all stand up and to energize yourselves. Like some of you could have not, you could have just gone, nah, I'm not doing that. But we're getting involved. That's the best way to do things. Also going back to confidentiality, just to sort of be aware when I split you into groups and when you're sharing now, just be mindful of what you share. Think about what you're sharing. You're not in a confidential environment. For some of you, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about can be quite emotive as well. And just to sort of be mindful of that, like regardless of how much we know about everybody, you may know each other, you don't know everything about everybody. Nobody knows. There is no one person who knows every single thing about you. Equally, you will never know every single thing about everybody else. That's quite a shock to parents sometimes, like when they twig that bit of information. But we've got a load of like shamey rubbish that we carry. So why hasn't everybody else got shamey rubbish? Of course they have. And some of that stuff is stuff that we're not happy to share. So let's keep going. I'm very interested in all this detached youth work. We've got some detached youth work training tomorrow. So if you want to get yourselves on that, you can even message me and I will sort you out with a discount. George, you run the Sweatbox Youth Centre. That sounds awesome. It's just got a cool name, hasn't it? Okay, also, if anyone's jealous of my PowerPoint presentation skills, please do get in touch. I'm really happy to share vectors and graphics that make everything look lovely. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so most young people who try drugs do not continue their use or develop significant problems. Experimentation and a variable pattern of use and cessation are much more common. For those who do, the consequences of use are determined in large part by the cultural, legal, social, and economic context of use. Harm results directly from young people's own substance use as well as from substance use of those around them, including use by other young people, family members and adults. So it's kind of important that we're aware of what else is. It's not just about a young person's drug use, it's about the environment that's going on around them. And we're going to break that down a bit more later on in the session. Harm also results from the criminalisation of users, and in particular, their imprisonment. It can increase their marginalisation, and it increases their experience of stigma. This can decrease their access to and participation in interventions to address any substance use related harm. And I guess that's a really great place to start. It's not just about a young person's drug use, it's about why they're using, it's about the impact of their use. For some young people, they'll use drugs and they'll have no problems. No problems then, no problems in the future, no problems at all. It may be that you were a young person who tried drugs and was absolutely fine. I'm assuming, because we're all in England, that probably the majority of you have tried heroin. Only joking, just checking if you're awake. I mean alcohol. Majority of you have tried alcohol. At some point, you've either been drunk or you've seen people who are drunk. Is that right? Yes, yes, yes. Any of you with your alcohol knowledge, because you've had so much experience, in your life, any of you know the exact dose of alcohol to definitely always have a great time? No, that's a legal drug that you've been drinking for quite a while, probably in your life. Yeah? And yet still we don't know the dosage. So these are the types of things that we're trying to keep in mind, okay? We're trying to keep in mind how we connect with young people, how we stay connected with young people, but also, let's be real, let's be authentic. There's no point saying to young people, well, you know this and you know that. Well, you know it, and you don't know the answers necessarily. Anyone understand the law around drugs? Anyone think it's just totes makes sense? Got some head shakers.
I don't think it does.
Cadus, you don't think it does. Can I ask you why you don't think it does? I agree with you, by the way.
Because I feel that as a society, we're very reactive to how things are done. And I feel that people don't really talk about the reasons as to why people use drugs. I think I've been keeping up with some cases in Portugal where they've legalized all drugs. And because of that, they focus more on rehabilitation, right? And
Hi, it's Maya speaking. I think the drug laws are too confusing with all the add-ons, etc.
Good. So, Cadus, I'm assuming you're agreeing with that. And is it Maja?
Maya.
Maya, sorry, my bad.
It's okay.
I'm doing phonetics in my homeschool, sorry. I completely agree with you, okay? I agree with everybody on this, right? But it's really important that we remember this, because if we're going to try and speak to young people in a real and authentic way, which we are so lucky as youth workers to have that sort of privilege to do so, then let's be real and let's be authentic the whole way through. So if you don't understand the laws, we admit we don't understand the laws. They're a bit confusing. There's lots of things that I don't understand, and I don't have to. But the reality is we have to cover the law a little bit, okay? So the bit of the law that I will always cover, even if I'm doing really positive harm reduction work, I'm still going to be mentioning the law, because the law exists and the law has consequences, as simple as that. If I get caught with a cannabis joint, I can't turn around and say, I thought I was in Portugal. I thought I was in LA. But you can't say any of that, right? So the laws are the laws carry consequences, and we need to be mindful of those laws. For the young people that I work with who are already using substances, they are completely unfazed by the law. So let's touch on it briefly, and then let's move on to the real sort of impactful work that we can do where we can sort of make a difference. Maya's made a very point in the chat. She said that if alcohol was invented today, it would be a class A. I'd like to say it would be, but I'm actually not sure, because the way that drugs are regulated, it doesn't make any sense at all. And equally, there are drugs that are less, have a less of a that they're a C or they're legal, and for me they're really risky drugs. So let's give you some tips. So these are my, like, straight up, if this is all you're going to take away, take this with you. Okay, so not all drugs are bad. In the UK, the most commonly used drugs are controlled by age. Others can be bought over the counter. Some are prescription only. Some drugs are illegal to make, buy, possess, or sell, but all drugs are dangerous if misused. And I think that's like your biggest statement at the end. All drugs are dangerous if misused. Okay, so any drugs that you might have tried, maybe in your lifetime, or people who have tried them, we know that just trying something once is highly unlikely to cause addiction. We know that addiction is over time. A bit like if I eat a chocolate cake, I am not going to be fat, but if I keep eating like that over a period of time, I will start to develop those signs, right? And that's the same with addiction. It doesn't come overnight. It is a gradual process, and there's plenty of things involved when it comes to that. The other thing that I do want to make very clear is about your brain, and that young people's brains are different to adult brains. Young people's brains are still growing, and if we take drugs whilst our brains are growing, it can have an impact on the growth of our brain. Potentially, I guess it's to do with the way we react to things, our level of tolerance to things. Maybe our anger issues could be connected to that, anxiety can be connected to that. And it's quite a hard thing to look at because of mental health, and that mental health is invisible. It's quite hard to be to know exactly the sort of impact that taking drugs whilst your brain is growing can have. But they do say that certain hemispheres don't develop in the way that they should. So let's talk a bit more about harm. So when we're talking about drugs, we're talking about people who are using drugs in a harmful way. So I'm not so worried about the person who tries cannabis, or the person who had a puff on a cigarette, or the person who had a sherry at Christmas with their parents. Like, we're talking about harm and the effects of harm, and understanding what harm is, and not being afraid to talk about drugs with young people, because we want them to understand what harm is as well. So if I can't go off and do my own risk assessment by myself, then I've not really learned anything at all. So I need a volunteer. Would anyone like to volunteer, please? I don't mind picking on people, but it's not ideal. Yes, Cadus, thank you so much. And I'm sure everyone else will thank you as well, because some people have heart palpitations when they're asked to volunteer. So you might have saved somebody having a mini anxiety attack. So Cadus, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You're there, okay. So now, do you drink alcohol ever?
I like a glass of wine.
Every so often. Or an old fashioned. Oh, I do like an old fashioned. Okay, so Cadus, this is a hypothetical situation, so don't worry too much. Okay, so I'm planning on having a wine and old fashioned party. It's just you and me actually, and everyone else maybe. But I've got it. They're dropping it round now, but it's quite a lot of alcohol. It was fine. They didn't question me at Tesco's, because they don't question you at Tesco's as long as you can afford it. they just let you buy as much alcohol as you want, even enough alcohol to like kill all of you in one session. No one will actually question me. As long as I look all right. They might even say, oh, you're having a party. They might actually encourage me. I know, it's brilliant, isn't it? It's not the same if it was a crack or something. So we're having this party, Cadis, and I want to know if you're up for having a party. I know it's a bit early, but like, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts when I say, yeah, let's just get hammered now?
I'd probably ask if everything's okay.
Yeah, no. I just want to, like, you know, let go. What, you know, I want to know whether you want to get hammered. What's going through your mind now?
If you're asking me as a 31-year-old man now, I'd say
yes,
no.
I'm asking you as a 31-year-old man. I want to know what is going through, what goes through your mind? Like, what's the risk assessment that goes through your mind?
I think for me, well, it depends on the day. So if you're asking me today, it's Wednesday.
Today.
I've got work tomorrow. I've also got mentees that I'm meeting. So it wouldn't really be a good choice for me to get drunk tonight because I don't deal with hangovers well. So that'd probably be the first point that I'll go to.
So that was about 7 things that went through your mind then. Yeah. So you were saying, oh, I need to think about tomorrow. What have I got going on today? And I got this and I got that. And you know, there's all different things that go through your mind when you make that decision. And it's taken you till this age, maybe, to work out what that risk assessment looks like, right? And we do risk assessments all the time. Thank you, Cadis. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. Right. So we're trying to teach young people to have that exact same risk assessment. And the only way to do that is to explain things in a bit more detail to them so that they can make their own decisions. Because when it comes to like context and asking, why did you do that? Why did that go wrong? Sometimes the context is like the shamey stuff, you know, like I did that. I don't know. I got in the car with someone when they were drunk not because I'm an idiot, but that might be the answer I give you because I'm an idiot. But the answer might actually be, I did that because I really fancied the guy. It was my best friend's cousin. Everyone else was getting in the car. No one else was scared. And then, so the context, I can't really explain to you. So what we're trying to teach young people is that in every context, here's my risk assessment, the same risk assessment sort of that you use, you know, when you're like in a queue on the motorway and you pick your lane, or you're in Asda and you pick the queue in Asda's. You start looking, you're like, oh, I'm not going to use that checkout person, she's 97, or there's too many people there, they've got too many stuff in their trolley, whatever. You make a risk assessment. We naturally are doing this all the time. So we want to be giving young people the ability to do that as well. And we do that by giving loads of education, loads of information, so that they can make their own informed decisions. So there's a few different reasons why young people might use drugs. So we've got the different stages. So experimental, recreational, situational. So the environment maybe that they're in, they might use it in a harmful way. And right at the end, we've got dependent. Now, I haven't put on there, but it is a stage, is just drug free. And there are lots of young people who are drug free. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I think sometimes when we get stuck in our jobs, we think like all young people are like sending sexual images and everyone's taking drugs and everyone's doing this, everyone's doing that. When in reality, that's just the bubble that we're in with the young people that we're in. Okay, so if we want to just write in the chat why you think some young people use drugs, that's what I would like to know, some of the reasons. And if you want to like get brownie points, whether it's different for an adult to the young person. I've got lots of different reasons: escaping, buzz, or peer group acceptance, can't cope with their experiences. Yeah, it's a great number. It's what friends are doing. They're lonely, bored, stressed. Yeah, these are all awesome. It can seem cool. Or they can't sleep. Oh, I get a lot of young people who say that I can't sleep or I can't eat unless I'm stoned. Enjoying it. Excellent. sense of going against the establishment. Yeah, and I think that's a bit different for adults, isn't it? So mostly that's the young people thing, isn't it? A way to socialize. Yeah, it's very social drugs. Peer pressure. So when we talk about peer pressure, particularly with drugs, I always talk about peer association. So I don't believe there's that much peer pressure, like do it, do it, do it. But I do think that peer pressure is with alcohol. Like for all of you, even now as adults, you probably have experienced peer pressure with alcohol. Whereas like if you if you went into a crack house, no one says do it, do it, do it, do it. Come on, do it with me, because no one wants to share. So it's one of those drugs that it's much more to do with association. So everyone else is doing it, which makes me want to do it. So that can be a bit different. So where do the harms from drugs come from? And when we sort of break down these different elements, then we can start to work out why we've not had a good time, why potentially we're not going to get engaged in that. So that's why these are some of the things that Cadus went through in his mind when I asked him if he wanted to get hammered with me at 11 o'clock in the morning or whatever time it is. The amount that we use, the frequency that we use, so how often, the place where we're using, our actual reasons for using can have harm attached to it. The company that we've kept with us. So I think about, for me personally, when I was a young person, I had a big group of friends who were just horrible. They were just not very nice people and they weren't nice to each other. It wasn't a nice place to be, and I didn't feel particularly myself comfortable, confident, any of those things. And when we don't feel comfortable and confident, then that can really get in the way of us having a good time. And the way that we use the drugs, so particularly things like injecting and smoking, that has extra harms as well. So this is a very famous old school drug law. It's called drug set and setting. I use this with young people, I use this with adults. It's a great way to understand. I do it like an equation actually with young people, where we add the drug to the setting to the mindset, and then we decide whether the person's going to have a good time or not. And it's kind of fun to do, because if you stick to the same drug but you change the mindset and you change the environment, you get different outcomes. So different outcomes with the same drug. So it's very relevant how our mindset is, and the environment are really, really important parts of this puzzle, really. Is this something that anyone's used before? Drug set and setting? Yeah, Ellie's used it before. Ellie, will you just unmute for a second? I'd just like to know what in what situations you've used it and whether it was helpful or not.
Well, I'm currently doing a master's in drug and alcohol studies, so
I
use it as theory a lot. But with young people, it is really it's really useful, because so if you talk about the way I've done it is like smoking weed at a party compared to smoking it on a bench, like they have a completely different time, even though they could still be with the same people, but it's literally being outside or being inside.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge difference, right? And there's like more harms when you're outside as well. So potentially there's more things to hurt yourself on and to distract you as well. Some of the young offenders that I've worked with say that they do a lot of their robberies when they're stoned, and they need to be stoned to do the robberies. And it's interesting that if you were in your house, you maybe wouldn't be thinking about a robbery, whereas if you're sitting on a bench, you might notice more opportunities for doing stuff like that as well. So it's really important that we add up all of those things and we break down all of those things. So if we're going to just do a really basic form of harm reduction, we could just literally stick with these three things and look at the outcome, and you'd have a great you'd probably have a great session when it comes to substance misuse. I would also say, from my knowledge, in the UK, how many drugs do you think are available at the moment? Anyone want to guess? I don't want any Googlers. That's just cheating. I think it's about 900 and something. Yeah, it's hundreds and hundreds, right? So yeah, so in any one session, you're never going to cover all the drugs anyway. So you may as well sort of like forget that, because if you can't cover all the different drugs, then you want to be more specific and thinking about, like, this is my outcome. What am I trying to get from these sessions, and how am I going to make it, you know, work? And I'm going to make it work by talking about addiction, talking about tolerance, talking about mental health and self-care, and talking about these sorts of things like what we've got here. And then we're going to get a much better response from the young people, and they can come back and ask more specific stuff, like about cannabis, let's say, or about MDMA or whatever specific drugs. But I mean, I never do an assembly at school on drugs, and I very rarely will do like a 1 hour session where we just go through each drug, because it's just such a waste of time. You can get so much more from your session. So let's have a look at some of these sort of basic needs of human beings. This is a psychologist, William Glaser, who proposed a model which suggested that after our basic needs for survival are met, there are 5 psychological needs that we seek out for our happiness and our balance: a sense of belonging or community, a sense of empowerment and the ability to have control over our lives and decisions, a sense of freedom, and a need for fun and leisure. Okay, so it's just one perspective and a way that we can sort of look at how young people's needs are being met. So how might substance use or addiction meet the needs of young people, do you think?
If we're talking about mental health, anxiety and panic, so some people might take the drugs to deal with that. And if we're talking about ADHD, some of the young people sort of used to tell us as youth workers, it used to stop all that noise in their head and calm them down. So like if they were using cannabis, it just made them feel more relaxed and stop that noise.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point that you just made there, Maya. Is to do with like your higher brain and your lower brain. So we've got a higher brain that gives us a lot of rational stuff. You know, it tells you that you are good enough, you are able, you can manage this. And then we've got a lower brain which isn't always honest with us. It tells us a lot of different stuff, like we're not good enough, and a lot of other chat, which is what you're talking about, Maya. And I can really relate to that, funnily enough, especially as a young person, that sort of like overload of brain chatter and just wanting a bit of peace. You know, young people who self-harm have the same issues as well, where they've got tons of ruminating stuff, just mind stuff, and you just want silence. For any of you who've like come home and like eaten 25 biscuits in one go, you will understand that idea of just, I want silence, just for a minute of silence. And if we get used to that and we do that a lot, that becomes something that that we do often. We may even do it quite habitually. So let's have a look at some comments that young people have said about the needs that are being met. Yeah, Zin's made a really good point about people who sell drugs for income. Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely money to be made. That's why, look at your Pablo Escobars and whoever. There's definitely a lot of money to be made. And for some young people in the environments that they're in, that's the only place to make money. That's the only space to make money. So let's have a look at these, what needs are being met. I mean, I find this quite fascinating. People, when particularly young people who smoke cannabis, I find they absolutely love cannabis. Like, they're in love with it. You know, they have nothing negative to say about it, and they don't want to hear anything negative either. So we need to be quite careful in our delivery, because if I'm just going to start spitting negative stuff like, oh, it's going to give you psychosis, which is so rare, by the way, it's going to give you psychosis and you'll get a criminal record and, you know, all this you'll never be able to go to America or be in the army. And young people are just so not listening to that. The young people that I'm working with who are already using cannabis, you've lost them. And you'll never get them back by using that kind of chat. So we want to try and make sure that the chat we use with our young people is, chat that works, chat that engages, chat that keeps rapport and keeps things going. Because you'll get to have longer conversations with your young people if you manage to keep the rapport going. So it may not be able to get it all out in one go, but they may keep coming back, and you'll get way more work done, good work done as well, if we do it that way. So someone said about parents using it too. Yeah, so we know that when communities and parents and the environment are using drugs, that can normalize it for some young people. It tends to be that people go one way or the other, particularly young people of alcoholic parents. They tend to either also become alcoholic or become the complete opposite, so they won't even touch a drop. And we don't really know why it is one way for another. The same way we don't really know why some people are born with huge amounts of resilience and some young people just aren't. We know that we can grow resilience, but there are some young people who go through extreme adversity, and they come out like amazingly. I always think of like Oprah Winfrey, who was like traumatized and abused, and she was just a resilient person. And I think I do say that to young people, remind young people that we can overcome adversity. People overcome adversity all the time. And when we're not really going to be given too much, more than we can handle. So I'm just looking in the chat. Yes, look, Neil said that his dad was a heavy smoker, but he'd never touched cigarettes himself. Whereas there may be others who that was the first cigarette they had, was one that they nabbed off their parents. So some of the reasons why people use drugs: so to cope with life circumstances, to self-medicate, like physical or mental health stuff, to escape and disconnect, to deal with boredom and hopelessness, if they were expecting or wanting to have sex. There's a lot of chemical drugs that go match up with sexual stuff. You can look that up. That's very, very interesting space, the chemsex environment. Yeah, someone's put grooming, absolutely. And it might be part of their social network or their street culture. Excellent. So where are some people using drugs? Now, this is this came from some research about where, and I don't know about your young people, but I reckon I've probably covered it here, where young people are using drugs. So it's not just harm about the drug or the addiction, but there's harm about where we're using the drugs as well, because we're putting ourselves, or young people are putting themselves in locations that are at risk of harm. There might be conflict going on in these spaces as well, and like aggression and tempers going on as well. So all of that can add to the harm for a young person, and it sort of encourages things like sharing drug equipment and unhygienic injections or overdoses, maybe even unprotected sex. So being on a park bench, like Ellie was saying before, is quite relevant to whether you're going to have a good experience, because you can't guarantee what's going to come past you, or what you're going to bump into whilst you're on that experience. So we want to think about what we want to achieve when it comes to the work that we're trying to do. So we've got the don't do it approach. This is the pits for me. So most drug education programs tend to aim for a reduction in drug use, which would be awesome, with the insurmountable aim to create a drug-free world. Is this realistic? No.
No.
Young people say yes, and there's lots of things to say yes to, and they just like, and we're creating more things to say yes to all the time. So I think we're probably more sensible, if we want to do effective and impactful drug work, to be thinking about a healthier relationship with drugs, an informed cohort of students or young people who can either abstain or take drugs more safely. And less drug use doesn't always mean a better outcome, because we know that at the moment that young people are, that it's on the decline, drug use, but the way that young people are using drugs is definitely more risky. So just because there's less use doesn't mean that it's less risky. There definitely is still very risky behaviour going on. If we think about young people in their 20s who are having liver disease or having bladder problems related to drug use, that's to do with the way that people are using, and we haven't had that before, so we know that things are more risky. So ideally we're trying to prevent drug misuse rather than all drug use, which is very forward thinking. Lots of people have been doing this already for years and years, so don't panic about doing this kind of work. And it tends to be much more effective. And like I said, you're much more likely to maintain your rapport and your connection with young people. So let's talk a bit more in detail about harm reduction and what harm reduction really is. So harm reduction aims to reduce the adverse health, social and economic consequences of drug use while the person is still using drugs. So at no point are we trying to stop that person from using drugs. We're actually trying to educate them whilst they're using drugs. So I'm going to go back to my personal experiences. So like I said to you, I'm an adult diagnosed with ADHD. As a young person, I started self-harming quite badly when I was 7. And that sort of continued for me with harming behaviours. So I continued to self-harm all the way through my teens. And through my teens, like I said, I had unhealthy relationships with friends. Obviously, if you're having unhealthy relationships with friends, that will spill over when it comes to romantic relationships, and you'll have unhealthy romantic relationships. I was in an eating disorders unit at 19. And I struggled, majorly struggled. And for me, had someone said, well, I know with my bulimia, people would say, right, try this week just not to make yourself sick at all. Now, making myself sick and cutting and all the other things that I was doing, they were my coping mechanisms. They actually were what's keeping me alive. So for me, I don't want to stop those things. I actually want to continue them because I don't know how to cope. I don't know how to manage what is going on for me. So for a lot of the young people that you're working with, drugs is not the problem. Drugs is the solution for them. The problem is something else. We always say this, look beyond the behavior. If your young person flips the table and runs out of the room, that's not because they're trying to cause a problem. They've got stuff going on. Look beyond the behavior. Okay, when we look beyond the behavior, we're going to find all the things that we need to unpick. Once we unpick those things, the harming behaviors actually can change. Okay, or we teach like more bits of self-care. So let's use self-harm as an example. I hear of parents who take away all of the sharp objects in the house, everything. They're like spreading butter on their toast with a spoon, and all sorts of stuff is going on, right? And if you're a young person who self-harms and you feel like you've got your impulse to self-harm, you will self-harm with whatever there is available. Now, if you've taken away my tool that I always use, then I'm going to go and find another tool. And I don't know how to use that tool so well. And I maybe will make a mistake. Now, it's much more effective for a young self-harmer to learn basic first aid, how to use a steri-strip, how to clean up a wound. And once I'm learning how to look after those things, I'm learning elements of self-care. And from learning elements of self-care, potentially I may not self-harm next time. Next time I might try a different element of self-care, like running a bath or something else beforehand. So harm reduction is, the idea of it is not to get the person to stop using drugs. It's to just teach them how to reduce the harm. So why? Why harm reduction? So firstly, we're never going to have a drug-free society. Alcohol's legal. Alcohol's regulated. Do we still have alcoholics? Cannabis is illegal. Do we still have people addicted to cannabis? Yes. We need to educate. We need to support people. So abstinence has its limitations for many people, even though we know that Alcoholics Anonymous and all the other anonymouses, like Narcotics Anonymous and all of that, they have a really high recovery rate, where abstinence is the key for that. Enforcement, we know, has its limitations, particularly for the young people that we're working with. I also think it's a bit of a shame that the law is so involved as well, because it means that sometimes young people don't have the relationship with the police that they could do, because all of a sudden, you know, I'm doing one thing like smoking cannabis, but now I'm a criminal. So now I've got a bad relationship where you know, this is it's just stigma. It's a real issue. Primary prevention tends to have its limitations as well. It tends to be quite low quality as well. And people will continue to use drugs, get sick and die. So our plan is we can reduce illness, suffering, deaths and other harms that people experience. And I know that all of you want to do that. All of you are, you know, you're not in it for the money. You know, we all work with young people. No one's in it for the money, obviously. Otherwise, we would have picked a completely different job. But we are in it because we love young people and we're passionate about young people and making changes. For any of you who are in it for the money, I'm sorry for you, because it's not great. You know, any of you had a young person say, "You're only here because you're getting paid. You're only here because you're getting paid." Oh, if I was only here because I was getting paid, I'd have become a florist, you know, where no one would have answered me back. But I'm here with you because actually I do love young people and I do want to make a change. So these are the principles, and these are many of the reasons why harm reduction really works. So it deals with the problem in a practical way, rather than by using theory or abstract principles. We're focusing on harm. We're looking at goals. Reward, not punishment. Any of you homeschoolers who are trying to use punishment as your way to make your children work, you will know that it doesn't work. So we may as well stop that. Reward, reward, reward. And it's a humanistic and human rights-based approach. You know, that's everything that youth work is. It's non-judgmental, trying to reduce stigma. It gives young people autonomy over what they're doing. It's flexible, and it is in fact evidence-based. We know that it works, so don't be afraid. So there are different harm reduction programs that are out there. For most of you, I would reckon that education and peer outreach is probably the bits where you're getting involved. I'm not sure, Ellie, what your master's is in, or what you know, maybe you're going to write a whole new harm reduction program. Maybe that's your who knows. I always rate people who are getting masters. That's
I'm trying to get it. I haven't
yeah.
got it.
Well, you're further ahead than I am, but you know, it's I've got ADHD. You know, my whole life I was just told you're not academic and you'll never be able to do anything. And then here I am writing presentations and papers and all sorts of things. You know, we defy all these different angles, don't we? We want to find those amazing role models for young people to see, you know, where people are going out and getting masters, where people are, you know, pushing the boundaries of adversity. So some of the basic concepts are focusing on reducing harm for that young person. And the only way we can do that is by finding out what harm they're sort of facing. And maybe they're not actually facing harm. Maybe the harm that you're going to bring up is actually not the harm that they can relate to. So that's why when we have people who come into schools and tell their life story about their drug use, and you know, that's why that doesn't work, because my story may not be your story, or my story may just like have some similarities to your story, but actually you're not even looking at that, you're just looking at all the differences. I had a young person say to me that they had someone come into their school and tell them about their experience with drugs, and she said it was really relatable at the beginning. The beginning of the story was very relatable because that's where that young person was at that point. But the end of the story, this drug user became a prostitute, and my young person was like, oh, I'm not going to be a prostitute. Well, she wasn't really thinking that this person who was stood in front of her did not plan that either. You know, no one plans prostitution. It's not like a forward career move. But when we fall into addiction, stuff happens, right? I worked with a young man who had an abscess in his groin. It was about the size of a golf ball, and he was injecting into that daily. And yeah, that was not his plan. When he first started using drugs, he was not thinking, I'm going to end up injecting this into this ginormous abscess in my groin. So yeah, what's relatable for one may not be relatable at all to another person. So we want to really be seeing it from a young person's point of view, which is why harm reduction really works, because it's really young person centered. So the problem is not necessarily the person, the substance, or the behavior, but the problem is the relationship between the person and the substance or the behavior. So if you think about any of you who've tried to be on a diet, I don't know anybody, this is, I'm just guessing, because a lot of COVID kilos piling up around at the moment. And I think your relationship with food is a great place to start. So for some of you who don't have a great relationship with food, maybe you think some foods are bad and some foods are good, and some foods you're worthy of and some foods you're not worthy of. You know, we can see that's already not a great relationship. So with that in our minds, we can sort of transfer that to substance use. And I'm trying to get you to think about what's relatable to you, because that's going to really help you when you're delivering your work to young people. If you are understanding that you don't know the exact right amount of alcohol to have a good time, you don't know, you know, how to totally balance your mental health, you also struggle with some of that stuff, that's going to make it much easier for your young person to relate to you and to support their own substance behavior. But what we do know is that young people need a safe and supportive environment with which for them to grow their health, whatever health that is. And I really believe that youth work is the environment for that. Youth work is the boundaries are so much more easy to work with than say if you were working in a school where you have to be very opinionated about drugs and straight down the line, and where these things are not open in the same sort of way. But talking about drugs with young people and educating around drugs in a young person's environment is really, really useful. We can't, I can't stress that enough. So thinking about drug education in a youth club and what that might look like. So your setting communicates understanding and acceptance of the individual. You might have posters and stuff going on around in your service that highlight that you are open to discussions around drugs and things like that, and that you're an inclusive service in all those different ways. I love stuff on the back of toilet doors and all of that. Like, the more stuff that we have and information that we have that's visible, the more likely a young person is to discuss stuff with us. Because for some of our young people, they don't know that you're, you know, available for that kind of chat. They've made a judgment based on, on other stuff. You know, a lot of people look at youth workers and think, well, you've got your stuff together. You don't know what it's like to be anxious and stressed. And you know, you all remember that feeling when you were a young person, that feeling of no one is going through what I'm going through. No one is going through my trauma, right? But we are, lots of us are. No one is like, anybody like woke up this morning like, yes, I'm amazing, I'm awesome, woohoo? No, because no one is, right? No one feels like that all the time. It's just not a normal thing to feel like that. So in your youth work setting, you can make that clear to young people so that they're able to say, come in and say, oh, I am having a bad day. This is a struggle for me. Like, don't know why, I just feel a bit flat today. That's why I made you all do your pumps when you got in. Like, I got some other stuff I can offer you on that as well. But it's a safe place also, free from violence, harassment and discrimination. For some young people, coming into their youth club and coming in and being with you is, it's the sanctuary, it's the safe space. And it's the place to build a relationship of trust based on sincerity and respect. I mean, that is just unbelievable, isn't it? What a gift that we have as youth workers and facilitators. So should young people be motivated to use and benefit from services? Do we have motivated clients and young people? So most young people are quite reluctant to seek out support when it comes to drugs. They tend to be just looking. So that's why education works really well. And that's another reason why we should use case studies for young people to work through rather than maybe looking at their own stuff, because they might find it easier to look at case studies. Our role is to raise awareness and engage the young person and to facilitate motivation, not to expect or judge it. And motivation usually grows via this engagement process anyway. So just by having a good connection with you can actually promote this sort of element for change. I just want to check what my time is. I've got plenty of time. Now, this is a very busy slide, so I'm hoping you've got good eyesight, you lot. So when I talk about a youth-friendly health service, that's your service. Your service is a health service, not just like physical health, mental health service. You're providing a service, and part of that means making sure that you have things in place, things like this, okay? This is going to support young people to disclose stuff to you, to learn from you, to come back, to come again, you know, and that's all part of the work that we're trying to do the whole time. So harm reduction is an underpinning approach to drug treatment. It can humanize and engage people who may need support in working their way through physical, mental, and social dysfunction. It's also a guiding principle that affirms human rights and dignity all people within our society deserve. I love this expression. And if ever a teacher, or you know, when I'm asked to come in and talk in schools, these are my reasons for covering harm reduction and for delivering in a harm reduction way. So what's some tips for harm reduction? So I thought, well, I've got a little video that I play with young people. So what I thought is I might play the video, because you might be getting bored of my chat. Obviously not, because who would be? But let's watch the video. You can get this on YouTube. It was a BBC Three show. You can actually watch the whole thing. But this, I just want to talk a bit about, I'm going to use cannabis as an example. So I've talked about what isn't great. Alexa, off. She's playing a song, sorry about that. I've talked about what doesn't really work when you're talking about cannabis. So I want to talk a bit about what does work when we're talking about cannabis. And this video is really useful for that, okay? So for those of you who knows what is the bit that gets you high in cannabis?
Tetrahydrocannabinol. THC.
THC.
THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, absolutely right. That is the bit that gets you high, okay? who knows what is the bit in cannabis that stops you, well, that prevents or weakens that sort of like the anxiety and the intensity, the likelihood that you're going to be sort of paranoid. What's the other chemical?
CBD.
Well done, Cadus. You smashed it. You're completely right. Now, we live in England. We don't live in a place where cannabis is regulated. So for us, if we want to buy cannabis, you're not going to get to know those levels. Drug dealers don't tell you, you know, this might make you a bit paranoid, you know, just have a little bit. There's none of that chat. You can't turn back to a drug dealer and say, listen, here's my receipt. You know, I had a bit of racing thoughts and I didn't like it. Can I swap it for something weaker? No, there's none of that. There's no receipts. There's none of that stuff going on, right? You don't have the luxury. So understanding what's in cannabis and why we might have different experiences is actually really, really important. So this is a great video. This woman is going to have some cannabis injections. If anyone can't hear, just write it in the chat. I'm going to press play.
Here at the Institute of Psychiatry, I've agreed to take part in a unique medical trial designed to find out. It's part of their ongoing research into the link between stronger cannabis and psychosis. The scientists are interested in the effects of the ratio between the two main components of cannabis, THC and cannabinoid. So on one day, I'm being injected with pure THC, something like ultra-high potency skunk. On the other day, I get a mixture of THC and cannabinoid, more like the natural makeup of the cannabis plant. When I get the injections, I don't know what I'm getting. It turns out that this one is a mixture of THC and cannabinoid. After 10 minutes, it hits me. With the THC and cannabinoid, no matter how hard I try to take the experiment seriously, it all seems hilarious.
I'll get you something a bit softer than that.
Sorry.
What does it feel like? It looks very enjoyable.
My God, it's fun! It was amazing. Amazing. With the pure THC, it's a different story. It's horrible. It's like being at a funeral. Worse. It's sort of like, it's just so depressing. You'd want to, top yourself. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of morbid. After 15 minutes, I begin a series of psychological tests designed to measure whether I've become psychotic, and if so, how severely. I feel agitated? No. On the THC and cannabinoid mixture, I seem really flippant. On this drug, I just don't care. I'm experiencing profound insights. Bollocks. I'm worried the state of mind won't end. I don't want it to end. This experience is frightening. Strong. I feel agitated. Yeah. I do. But with the pure THC, I'm suspicious, introverted, weird. Every question seems to have a double meaning. Trouble is, my attention's like really massively into just a word or something. It's like, but not in a happy. It's like in a morbid. Morbid is. That's how I feel. Morbid. It's an anxiety. It's like a panic attack. Do you know what I mean? It's like you ask me a question, I'm thinking, I don't know the answer. I'm just one of many volunteers taking part in this trial. The doctors are hoping to answer some of the really important questions about cannabis and psychosis. For example, do people react differently to exactly the same dose of THC? And can cannabinoid reduce the psychotic effect of THC? It certainly made me uncontrollably giggly. 2 hours later, the effects have worn off. So just how psychotic did I get? The psychiatrist used a standard test which measures changes in psychotic symptoms.
And on the first day you scored 1. Your change from baseline to the peak experience was 1, which is insignificant. Above 4 is thought to be clinically significant. Above 4 would be what you might expect in schizophrenic psychosis. And you scored 14 on the second day. So you were really quite persecuted, and really it felt quite unpleasant.
I scored 14. An increase.
Okay, so I believe, I'm hoping from that video that you've actually learned something about cannabis that could be useful to a young person, more useful than, say, cannabis gives you psychosis. Okay, so now we're able to actually explain what is inside cannabis, what it means. You know, some of it's invisible, we can't see it. You know, if you haven't got a drugs lab at home, which most people don't, then, you know, then we need to be mindful. We need to be aware that sometimes the cannabis we smoke actually is not going to be a good experience, and these are the reasons why. So just keeping that in your mind. I think you'll find that it's a great video. It's fun to watch, and it sort of breaks the ice as well because it's a little bit funny. So these are some basic harm reduction tips that I always use. If I was only going to give 5, these would probably be my 5. So do your research. Make sure you know about it. When I was growing up, it was like Children's Britannica. That was about the closest I could get to my information. We have such a luxury of being able to find information now. Use a trusted dealer. So maybe using someone that you know rather than some random person in the street or in a club or something. Set limits. And if we set limits, then we can give our brain sort of time to recover, and we sort of learn about tolerance and still having a good time. Like just using cannabis as an example, most people, the first few times they use cannabis, it's all very funny and giggly. And as the tolerance increases, that giggliness sort of disappears and you lose that. So it's quite economical also. And I think sometimes young people are interested in things being more economical as well. Big one here, avoid using when you're depressed or anxious. And I think that is something that only we know personally. You know when you're feeling down, you know when you're feeling anxious. So it might be that you want some of your sessions that are drug sessions are actually just sessions on what does it feel like when I feel down? What do I do to release and make myself, feel better? How do I react to things? And am I aware that my feelings will change and flow and not always stay the same? I don't need to be uncomfortable being uncomfortable. I can just sort of wait for those feelings to pass. And then the other is to eat properly, and that's another great form of self-care as well. So understanding how food reacts with us. I don't know if any of you guys, I know when I do trainings and when I'm teaching in schools, I know what everyone's had for lunch. I know whether you had a big, heavy, pizza-y, carby lunch, because you're like half asleep in the afternoon. So we're trying to work out what foods fuel us and how we react to them and the energy that it gives us. And by knowing that, ultimately, we might be looking at a drug and thinking, I don't want that because I don't want to feel like that. I don't like that feeling of, or feeling tired or fatigued or not feeling present. Equally, what goes up must come down. These are some great tips for, the day after, so to speak, even the week after. Depending on what drugs you're using, some people may feel low days after, and they just may not, compute those things. I mean, I love mood diaries. There's loads of apps we can use to write down our moods. For women, it's great to work out in your cycle where your moods are at and why your moods are related. You know, for me, I'm crazy when I'm ovulating, but I only knew that from writing it all down. So it's all these little things that are going to be useful to us. So I must be clear about harm reduction and schools, particularly harm reduction really with people who are not using drugs or even thinking about using drugs. Harm reduction will show you ways to take drugs in a safer way, and not safe, but safer. And for those people who do not want to use drugs or have no intention of using drugs, it might make them think that I can, you know, maybe I'll give that a try. So we want to be quite careful about the group that we're using. So these are some of the things that you might want to look at when you're thinking about like how you're building yourself as a worker, and you know, how we engage with young people and how we keep that trust and keep going. I've put humour first because I think humour is a great part of it, but we also need to know our audience, and sometimes humour is not suitable. So yeah, just I think as youth workers, that's a lot of how we work, is just trying to like register the audience and check that everyone's engaged or not, or where they're at. Some of the problems that are linked to drug using lifestyle can make it actually more difficult for that person to be healthy. So I've listed some of the issues. And sometimes with young people are putting pressure on themselves, and there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of other stuff that is making it difficult as well. So I just wanted to look at like life skills when it comes to diet and drug users, and drug use. So I don't know if this is something that you've thought about. Like, what do you think like young people are thinking about around food? Like, are they thinking sensibly around food, or are they trying to just save money all the time? Like, do they have a good knowledge? Like, talking about food and nutrition and understanding it and how it makes us feel and think is like, it's like what you should tell a 4-year-old, so that when she's a 15-year-old, she'll be thinking about her drug use. It's the prevention, it's the harm reduction, it's the harm minimization that we can do really early that can be really helpful. Equally, just by saying, you know, getting young people to look at inside a paracetamol box where there's tons of information, tons of detail. But do you have that when you go to a drug dealer? Absolutely not. We don't have that it's been researched and we've got like a dosage and we know exactly how much to give a person of a certain size and all of those things. We don't have any of that. That's missing. So great harm reduction would be, yeah, looking at like medicine and why those sheets are in there and what that all means. And that they all have side effects, even the so-called good drugs, or the drugs that, you know, that are being given to people. I want you to think about helping your young person develop a realistic expectation of what you can achieve. So we're not making any promises that we can't keep. We're making it nice and clear and easy. We're starting from where that young person is at. And just to have a think about some of the elements of helping a person. And like, I like to, when it comes to mental health, I just try to think about like, how would you treat a person who doesn't feel well? And if you think about how you would treat a person who doesn't feel well, you might, you know, you might be a bit kinder, a bit, you know, more non-judgmental. You know, you might validate them and make them feel good. And sometimes when we don't feel well, we're not just sweet and easy to deal with. Sometimes when we don't feel well, we're difficult and irritable and moody and off. And yeah, you know, as youth workers, we're just not meant, we don't need to be judgmental of that. We need to continue that process. We want to help that young person create goals. I like the SMART, you know, specific, measurable. Now I've like lost my train of thought, but there's this SMART acronym. I'm sure some of you know it. You should use that. because that's a great way to explain goals. But they should be small and easy. Young people that I work with love praise, love rewards. Some of the young people that I work with, actually, the way they react to praise is just, it's amazing. It's so important for them. It's big, it's a gift. Yeah, we don't need to be judgmental. So I wanted to sort of look through what some of the possible challenges might be when you are trying to talk to a young person about drugs, and sort of how they might respond. So I've got some examples, like stuff that I believe happens a lot, but I'm sure there are other examples as well. So let's just specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Smart. Thank you so much. So the young person is silent. Anyone ever had that? The young person is silent. You start bombarding them with questions. What about, have you tried? What have you done this week? So you may want to just give a bit more time for that young person to warm up. It may be that one-to-one is not a great environment. It may be that groups, pairs is a better environment for them. It may be that it's going to take time for them to open up. It may also be like the first few sessions where it just takes a bit of time for them. I find that sometimes I think that a young person's having a terrible time and they're not engaging at all, but they keep coming back. So they are engaging. They do want to be there. And, you know, just because their mannerisms are saying one thing doesn't necessarily mean that is what's going on. But I strongly don't recommend asking loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of questions and just keep going and going and going and going. You need to change your route. So it might be that you just put on a YouTube video and discuss that, or talk about something else. It's going to take time for that young person. So the young person appears to have very little knowledge about the substance that they're using. We see this a lot, don't we? They think they're so knowledgeable and they just like know nothing, you know? So we want to give them some education about the issues that are being discussed. And like I said, for some young people, depending on where they're at, we don't want to humiliate anyone. We're not trying to shame or embarrass anyone. We just want the young person to keep coming back and to keep learning with us. So we do that by educating them, maybe in a non-direct way. The young person cries. This does happen, especially if you're dealing with a young person who's struggling massively, or you might have triggered something by talking about something for them. It's obviously okay for a person to cry, and we should allow young people to have that space. But I would also say, like hats off to anybody who, when a young person starts disclosing or really sort of giving a lot more information, that means that you've provided a really nice environment for that person to disclose that, and they may have been holding that for a long time. So yeah, that's why I said at the beginning, I want you to learn to love disclosures. The young person wishes to talk about something else other than decision making. I know you've all been there. It's called an agenda clash, and when we've got an agenda clash, we're breaking our connection with young people. So if that young person is not really thinking about that, then potentially we want to be looking at something else. So we want to try and move the conversation somewhere else. I mean, if you're desperate, you might want to try and address the reason why they're not ready to discuss it either. That might be another thing. But for me, I would just keep moving, and I don't want an agenda clash. I don't want to argue with a young person at all. So some guidelines maybe for responding to a young person who may be at risk when it comes to drug use. So be aware of your own values and attitudes. Avoid judging, labeling and blaming. Any training that you come on with me, any session you come on with me, for me, these are huge, absolutely huge. You will have all experienced judgment, labeling and blaming in your life, and you will carry that with you depending on how it was given to you and who it was given to you from. that stuff is the stuff that we carry it all over the place. It is the stuff that causes huge ripple effects in our life. So we don't want to be the youth worker that does that to a young person. Instead, we want to focus on rapport building. Your greatest asset is building trust with that young person, providing information, raising awareness, emphasizing safety and harm reduction, and all delivered with concern and a non-confrontational manner. I'm going quite quickly now, I'm afraid. We also want to make sure that we're informed. Like I said, there's hundreds of drugs. You can't be a drug expert. I'm not a drug expert. No one's a drug expert. It's too much, you know, unless you're like a scientist and you've been doing that. It's, you know, it's you're not an expert, and we don't need to try. We need to just wait for our little teachable moments and see where they are. Focus on strengths, resilience, and good choices. And I would say that is probably the basis of good harm reduction. Don't confront a young person if they're under the influence. Make sure everyone is safe in your environment. And if you need to refer on, make sure you follow the guidelines of your organisation. For me, good drug education has a life skills approach. We're looking at behaviour change. We're trying to balance knowledge, attitudes and skills. That's nearly all my life skills programs are written under that: knowledge, attitudes and skills. I'm working on those three things. We're using all the teaching and learning methods that we can to help it be understandable for young people, and making sure that we're gender sensitive, that we're inclusive, and we're inclusive in our language. We should be doing that in all elements of the work that we're doing at the moment. When you're planning your program, I want you to think about these things. Maybe take a photo of this now. If this is something that you're trying to do, you're trying to plan your program, you want to think about what's the prevalence of drugs, what drugs are being used, because each of the sessions that you do isn't necessarily going to work for all the young people. So if we know what our young people are at and we know what's going on, like I've worked with a group, I'm working with a group of adopted young people at the moment, and we're doing our drug session next week. I said, what drugs do you all want to talk about? And someone said crystal meth. It's really interesting because crystal meth is really not a common drug in this country at all, but it's got loads of media coverage because of like movies and programs that it's connected to. So whilst I will talk about crystal meth, it's highly unlikely that the young people that I'm working with, that's the drug that they're looking at. So it's nice to ask. Don't just go in, oh, we're doing a drug session. We want to ask, what do you want in your drug session? What do we want to talk about? What are you interested in? And you don't have to be interested because you want to take that drug. You could just be interested because you're interested. I mean, I'm interested in all sorts of weird stuff that I'm not connected to, but I'm still interested, you know? Reflect on your service. Have a look now and think, you know, how well are you doing things? How well are you providing a service for young people who are using drugs? Is it a safe environment? You know, do you have a good understanding? If you've got appropriate activities, all of these different things, are you using the correct data systems? Are you managing all of your evidence? So a quick sort of recap of harm reduction and what's good about it and why it works. It's well-researched, evidence-based approach shown to be effective in decreasing substance use-related harms. To use or not to use. This is Hamlet. So we're not encouraging young people to use or not use. We're not forcing anything. It's a great non-judgmental approach. There's two sides to every coin, and that's what harm reduction says. It says we understand, we accept, you know, the reasons why you do things. We accept that. It's right here and right now. And I so believe that, you know, ask anybody. If I ask any of you whether you like think about your liver, any of you think about your liver? Anyone woke up this morning and was like, yeah, that was a wicked wee. It was really cleansing. I feel like my liver is, no, obviously not, because we're not in that sort of framework. But if my liver was like protruding from my body and was like, I was yellow and it was the size of a football, then I'd be thinking about my liver, right? So the thing with harm reduction is it's right here, right now. And I believe that's where young people are at when it comes to wanting to talk about drug use. There's an I in win. Harm reduction respects each individual's goal and offers lots of choices, just like youth work does. So it allows young people to sort of really focus on what's relevant to them and how they can stay safe. So a few little tips. Make sure your information is accurate. It's interactive and participative, so it's not lecturing. Make sure you are talking about social norms. What is really going on? Is everyone smoking? Is everyone having sex? Probably not. It's focused on skills, what skills that young person has, what they can work on. It builds on their knowledge. It gives time for discussion and exploration. Kevin, I'm going to go over a few minutes. Is that all right?
I'll have to fine you, Charlotte. No, it's fine. Of course it is.
Oh, good. I like a good fine. Okay, so these are two great videos. If you want to have a look at something a bit different, a bit interesting, this guy, Gabor Mate, is just my guru. Absolutely the most amazing, most interesting, unreal. Some of the stuff that he's talking about. Yeah, check some of those videos out. And yeah, just to sort of remind you that 3 billion people will take drugs across the world every year. 80 to 90% of them won't experience what we would class as any problems at all that require a drug service. So we don't really need to panic as much as some of us maybe do. You know, we're like, oh, I need to panic. I don't really need to panic. We need to just keep in line with what we're planning on doing and what's best for that young person. These are some great websites where you can find out some great information. I can't recommend any one more than the other. There's tons of information there. Crew 2000, I've been working alongside with a lot. They're on the podcast that's coming out as well about harm reduction. There's some really good stuff there. Yeah, go and get informed. Like if you don't understand, you're not sure, go and get that information. Equally, these are some great websites for you to refer young people onto. I just make a suggestion to all of you that you don't refer young people onto websites without having a look at those websites yourself. And it's not because that website is not going to be child friendly or whatever. It's just so that when we refer someone on, we can be specific. I think you would like this website because I checked it out and I saw this, that looked quite interesting. And I thought, you know, that's makes it more inviting. We're selling, you know, you're a seller. And if we're selling, how am I going to make, you know, how am I selling Childline? Because a lot of young people say Childline, go Childline. So I've got to sell it. Well, Childline covers stuff about exam stress, about divorce. You can go and speak to people one-to-one. You can speak to young people like you as well, who you can find support with and find similarity and commonality with. So we want to have that chat. That's the end of my my presentation. I will say to you that I have some drug training coming up in March. So if you want to check out the KIP Education website, you can, any of the training that we're doing, please go and have a look, because and if you email me, everything comes to me anyway. If you email me here, I can get you discounts, and everyone loves a discount because we work with young people and we've already established it's not highly paid work. So before I finish, does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask or anything they'd like to say? So that's a child being tortured. Sorry about that. It's nearly lunchtime. So no one's got any questions. So I've got one thing that I want you to do, and you're going to have to unmute for this, otherwise it's not going to work so well. Before I leave you all, my last thing I want to ask you is to think about where, like, the real warrior inside of you. Now I'm about to go and do homeschool, so I need to find that warrior in me, because I need to be ready to prepare for that. Now there's something called superhero pose, where you put your hands on your hips and you bring your shoulders back. Even that can trick your brain into thinking you are feeling more confident than you normally are. Oh, what a great stretch. Squeeze those shoulder blades together. Now for me, my warrior is like here in my stomach. that's pretty much where my anxiety is also there, just so you know, okay? But my warrior is there, so that's where I feel it, that's where it's big, right? So with my hands on my hips, I just want to hear your warrior sound, and no wishy-washy sounds as well, yeah? There's like really, okay, 1 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Ah!
Marnie, I didn't hear you too loudly.
No, I wasn't loud. I laughed, but I did get out what I needed.
Do you feel better though?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Isn't it crazy? You can trick your brain. How amazing, right? We should be teaching young people all these lovely mood boosters to help them. So with that in mind, I'm hoping you'll take your warrior out into the wide world and have a great day.